Widowed millionaire disguises himself to test his girlfriend with the triplets, and the maid finds out. While he traveled in silence, she left the babies crying for hours and went out as if she were single. The maid, whom no one noticed, cared for the children as if they were her own, and ended up catching everything. When the truth came out, it wasn't the millionaire who exposed the lie. It was the one who cleaned up her traces every day. Saturday morning slipped through the windows of the Upper West Side apartment like a silent promise. Gabriel Miller watched the city awaken from the 14th floor, a still steaming mug of coffee between his fingers. At 35, he had achieved everything he'd planned since he was young. The consulting firm he'd founded at 28 was growing consistently, projects were multiplying, and clients trusted his work. He was financially stable, recognized in his field, and respected by his peers. But there was an absence that no professional success could fill. Gabriel had always known he wanted to be a father. Not in the conventional way, not necessarily following the expected script of marriage, wife, kids. He wanted to build a family his way, on his time, with choices that made sense for his life. Romantic relationships came and went, some more significant, others just passing company. But the certainty that he was ready for fatherhood grew with each year, a conviction that didn't ask for permission to exist. It was on a Thursday afternoon, after a particularly draining meeting, that Gabriel made the final decision. Still sitting in his office as his team said their goodbyes and silence settled over the space, he picked up the phone and called the social worker he had spoken with months earlier. Her voice sounded surprised but welcoming. Yes, he was sure. Yes, he was ready. He wanted to start the adoption process. The following months were a mix of anxiety, anticipation, and bureaucracy. Paperwork, interviews, home visits, psychological evaluations. Gabriel submitted to it all with patience and determination. He renovated the apartment, turning 2 bedrooms into children's spaces, buying cribs, changing tables, and tiny little outfits that barely fit in his large hands. Each preparation was another step toward the dream that once seemed so distant. When the call finally came, Gabriel was on a video conference. His phone screen lit up with the number he had already memorized. He quickly excused himself to his colleagues and answered with a racing heart. The social worker's voice carried a controlled urgency. 3 newborn babies, biological siblings, had been left at the maternity ward. The mother was in no condition to raise them. The father was unknown. They were triplets, 2 boys and a girl. Gabriel closed his eyes and felt hot tears stream down his face without warning. Yes, he accepted. Yes, he wanted to meet them immediately. The first time he held Luke, Peter, and Marina in his arms was a moment Gabriel knew he would carry forever. Small, fragile, completely dependent. Their eyes still closed, the uncoordinated movements of their little arms, the unique baby smell that invaded all his senses. He looked at those 3 tiny beings and felt something reorganize inside him. Life, suddenly, had a new center, a purpose that needed no explanation. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Gabriel hired a newborn care specialist to help him during the adjustment period. He learned to change a diaper with one hand while holding a bottle with the other, developed a keen ear for distinguishing the different types of cries, and discovered he could function on far less sleep than he ever imagined. His company's routine had to adjust. Meetings were rescheduled, trips were cancelled, priorities completely reorganized, and Gabriel didn't care. For the first time in his life, something was genuinely more important than work. It was during this period of intense transformation that Veronica Shaw entered his life. They met at a charity gala that Gabriel almost didn't attend. He was exhausted. The babies had had a rough night, and all he wanted was to stay home. But his presence was important. Some clients would be there, and he made the effort to show up for at least a few hours. Veronica was at the center of a lively group, her loud, contagious laugh echoing through the ballroom. She was 32 and had a presence that commanded attention, blonde, tall, with an impeccable style that blended sophistication and modernity. She worked as an image consultant and had built a solid following on social media, where she shared tips on fashion, lifestyle, and female entrepreneurship. Her posts were carefully produced, each photo a perfect composition of light, angle, and message. When Gabriel casually mentioned that he had just adopted 3 babies, Veronica's reaction was immediate and effusive. She moved closer, her eyes shining with genuine interest, asking questions about the process, wanting to know everything about the children. Gabriel, tired but still enchanted by his own recent experience, spoke with enthusiasm about Luke, Peter, and Marina. Veronica listened intently, commenting on his courage, the nobility of his decision, the beauty of building a family this way. In the following days, Veronica kept in touch. Texts asking how the babies were, offering help, suggesting they meet for coffee. Gabriel, who previously had little time for relationships, found himself drawn to her attention. Veronica seemed genuinely interested not only in him, but in the entire new life he had built. Their first official date took place at a quiet cafe in the West Village. Veronica arrived on time, elegant even in her casual weekend attire. She asked about the babies, wanted to see pictures, and made affectionate comments about each of them. Gabriel showed her dozens of images on his phone, talking about the small daily victories, the challenges, the discoveries. Veronica smiled, asked the right questions, and seemed to understand the magnitude of his transformation. When Gabriel invited her to meet the children, Veronica accepted with enthusiasm. At the apartment, she leaned over the cribs, whispered sweet words, and took photos to post on her social media, with an emotional caption about the importance of responsible fatherhood and love that transcends biological ties. The comments poured in by the thousands, all praising her sensitivity and the beauty of Gabriel's gesture. It was also during this period that Gabriel decided to hire a permanent nanny to help with the house and the children. The newborn care specialist was temporary, and he needed someone who could be a stable presence. It was through a referral from an acquaintance that Eileen Davis came to him. Eileen was 38, with a discreet demeanor and an observant gaze that saw more than it spoke. Divorced for several years, she was raising her 7-year-old daughter, Julia, on her own, and worked with dedication in everything she did. During the interview, Gabriel sensed a quiet seriousness in her, a competence that didn't need to be announced. She had experience with children, impeccable references, and something in the way she looked at the babies convinced Gabriel that she was the right person. Eileen started work the following week. She arrived early, organized the house with quiet efficiency, and cared for the babies with an attention that went beyond professional duty. Gabriel noticed small details, the way she rocked Marina when the little girl was fussy, the special way she had of holding Peter to calm him down, the infinite patience with Luke, who had more trouble feeding. It was as if she intuitively understood what each one needed. Veronica began to show up at the apartment more frequently. Gabriel, growing more emotionally involved, saw in her a potential partner for this new phase of his life. She seemed interested in being part of the routine, talked about future plans, and suggested family outings. On social media, posts with Gabriel and the babies multiplied, always with inspiring captions about love, family, and courageous choices. But Eileen, with her observant and discreet nature, started to notice things, small inconsistencies. The way Veronica would subtly distance herself when one of the babies cried, the way she impatiently checked her phone when she had to be alone with the children for a few minutes, the seemingly innocent comments about how drastically Gabriel's life had changed, how much he had given up. One late afternoon, when Gabriel had to leave quickly to handle an emergency at the office, Veronica was left alone in the apartment with the 3 babies. Eileen had left early that day to take Julia to the doctor. Gabriel would be back in 2 hours, 3 at most. Veronica assured him everything was fine, that she would take care of everything. When Gabriel returned, he found the babies crying in their cribs, their diapers visibly soiled for hours, the bottles untouched, on the kitchen counter. Veronica was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, seemingly oblivious to the insistent crying coming from the bedroom. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, casually remarking that the babies had just woken up, and she was just about to prepare their bottles. Gabriel felt something tighten in his chest, but pushed the feeling away. Maybe she didn't have experience with babies. Maybe she didn't know how to read the signs yet. He said nothing, just went to care for the children, changing them one by one, feeding them with his usual patience. In the following days, Similar situations repeated themselves, always subtle enough to be justified, always with plausible explanations. Veronica would say she hadn't heard the crying because of her headphones, that she thought Gabriel was in the next room, that she had just stepped into the bathroom when the babies started to cry. Eileen witnessed some of these moments. One morning, she arrived to find Marina crying in her crib, while Veronica calmly drank coffee in the kitchen, the sound of the crying clearly audible throughout the apartment. Veronica greeted her naturally, as if nothing were wrong. Eileen said, "Nothing. Just went to the bedroom and picked up the baby," rocking her gently. Gabriel also began to notice the change in dynamics when Eileen was present. Veronica would transform. She would hold the babies, make funny faces, take pictures, and show affection. But there was something performative about it all, something that didn't match the moments when she thought no one was watching. One night, after Veronica had left, Gabriel lay awake for hours, his thoughts jumbled. He wanted to believe he was being unfair, that he was looking for problems where there were none. Veronica was attentive to him, interested, present. But there was a dissonance between what she showed in public and what he saw in the most mundane moments. It was Eileen who, unintentionally, planted the first real seed of doubt. In a casual conversation in the kitchen while they prepared the nighttime bottles, she commented on something that seemed innocent but carried a specific weight. She said that Julia had asked why the pretty lady who visited the house didn't like to hold the babies when no one was looking. Gabriel fell silent, his hands frozen on the counter. Eileen continued what she was doing, without pressing, without adding anything. But that sentence echoed in his mind for the rest of the night. The question from a sincere, observant 7-year-old, a child who had no reason to lie, who was simply reporting what she saw. That same week, Gabriel had to travel to Chicago for an important client meeting. It would be just for a day. He would leave early in the morning and return at night. Veronica immediately offered to stay with him at the apartment to help Eileen with the children. Gabriel thanked her, but something deep inside him hesitated. He asked Eileen to stay later that day, to only leave after he got back. During the trip, Gabriel could barely concentrate on the meeting. Thoughts of Veronica, Eileen, and the babies swirled in a confusion that made his stomach churn. He trusted Eileen completely. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that he was beginning to distrust Veronica, and admitting that meant questioning the entire relationship he had been building with her. On the flight back, Gabriel made a decision. He needed certainty. He needed to know if his suspicions were founded or if he was being paranoid and unfair, and there was only one way to find out the truth without a shadow of a doubt. In the following days, while Veronica was busy with professional commitments and Eileen managed the routine with the babies, Gabriel discreetly hired a home security company. He explained that he wanted a complete monitoring system with cameras and audio in all the main rooms. The technician installed everything in one day, small, discreet devices, almost invisible when positioned in the right places. Gabriel knew it could be seen as an invasion of privacy, that it could be ethically questionable. But the safety of his children was at stake. He needed to know who he was leaving Luke, Peter, and Marina with. He needed to be sure that the woman he was falling for was really who she claimed to be. The following week, Gabriel invented a business trip. 2 days in Washington, D.C. for meetings that couldn't be postponed. Veronica again offered to stay at the apartment to provide support. Eileen would be there during the day, but the nights would be Veronica's responsibility. Gabriel agreed, kissed the 3 babies for a long time before leaving, and departed with a heavy heart and his phone configured to receive notifications from the camera system. From his hotel room in D.C., Gabriel would watch everything, and what he would see over the next 48 hours would completely change the course of his life and his family. The footage started coming in that first night. Gabriel was sitting on the hotel bed, the light from his laptop illuminating his face in the dim room. It was almost 10 p.m. in D.C., but in New York, the baby's routine should have been well underway. The 8 o'clock bottle, a diaper change, the soft music he always played to help them sleep. He tapped the screen and opened the camera app, his heart beating faster than he'd like to admit. The first image that appeared was of the living room, empty, with only the kitchen light on in the background. Gabriel switched to the camera in the children's room. The 3 cribs side by side, Marina in the middle, Luke on the left, Peter on the right. The babies were stirring restlessly, small sounds of discomfort beginning to form. Gabriel checked the time. 8:20. Veronica should have been preparing the bottles. He waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. The sounds turned into crying. First Marina, then Luke, and finally Peter, in a rising chorus that made Gabriel's chest tighten even from miles away. He switched to the kitchen camera. Empty. To the living room. Veronica was on the couch, headphones in, scrolling through her phone with a focused expression. He turned up the audio. He could hear the children's cries perfectly, even through the walls. Gabriel gripped his phone tighter. He waited a little longer. Veronica didn't move. She just kept scrolling through her feed, laughing at something on the screen, completely oblivious to the growing desperation coming from the next room. After 20 minutes, she finally got up. But she didn't go to the baby's room. She went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine, and returned to the couch. Gabriel felt nausea rise in his throat. He wanted to call, to scream, to be there to pick up his children. But if he did that, she would know she was being watched, and he needed to see how far this would go. It was only when the cries turned into tired sobs, almost an hour later, that Veronica finally went to the room. Gabriel quickly switched to that camera. She entered with an annoyed expression, looked at the 3 cribs and let out a long, impatient sigh. She picked up the bottles that were already prepared, left by Eileen before she left. She didn't change their diapers, didn't pick up a single baby. She just placed the bottles in the cribs, propped up on rolled-up towels, and left the room. Gabriel watched as the babies tried to reach the bottles on their own, Luke crying because his had rolled to the side. His 4-month-old son trying to feed himself without help, without being held, without affection. He closed, his eyes hot tears streaming down his face. How had he been so blind? How had he not seen this before? The night continued in a painful pattern. Veronica only entered the room when the crying became absolutely insistent. She showed no affection, didn't talk to them, offered no comfort beyond what was strictly necessary to make them stop crying. And even then, she did everything with a rushed, barely concealed irritation. At one point, well after midnight, Veronica took a call. Gabriel couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but her side of the conversation was crystal clear. "I'm here with his kids, yeah, it's exhausting. I don't know how he does this every day. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. He has an established company, assets, stability. If I can get him to give up on this whole 3-baby idea, we can go back to having a normal life. And if it works out, we get married, wait a bit, and then I file for divorce. The settlement will set me up for life, you get it? I just have to be patient for now." Gabriel paused the video, rewound it, listened again. Every word was a stab. She wasn't there for love, she wasn't there for the children. It was a cold, calculated plan, executed with surgical precision, and he had fallen for it completely. The second day was even worse. In the morning, Eileen arrived and took over the care of the children with her usual efficiency. Gabriel watched on his phone while pretending to pay attention in a meeting. Eileen changed all 3, bathed them one by one, prepared and offered their bottles while holding them, humming softly. The difference was stark. Veronica didn't appear in the living room until after 10, already dressed to go out. She told Eileen she had to run some errands and would be back in the afternoon. Eileen just nodded, not asking any questions. But Gabriel noticed the way she looked at Veronica, a look that carried something he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't hostility, but it wasn't trust either. In the afternoon, Julia showed up at the apartment. It was Saturday, and Eileen had arranged to bring her along because she needed to stay late. The girl entered shyly, her curious eyes taking everything in. When she saw the babies, her face lit up. She approached the cribs slowly, as if she were in the presence of something precious and fragile. "Can I hold them, Mom?" Eileen smiled and helped Julia sit on the couch, carefully placing Marina in her arms. The girl held the baby with a gentleness that moved Gabriel through the screen. She spoke softly to Marina, telling her made-up stories, making funny faces to get her to smile. Luke and Peter watched from their bouncers, and Julia didn't forget them, turning to make silly faces that made them react. It was at that moment that Veronica returned. Gabriel saw her enter the apartment and find the scene in the living room. Julia with Marina in her arms, Eileen organizing bottles in the kitchen, the atmosphere calm and harmonious. Veronica's expression changed instantly. "What is going on here?" Her voice was cold, sharp. Eileen came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Julia is helping me with the children. It's Saturday. She didn't have school." "I don't recall authorizing you to bring guests. The house is full of strangers and no one consults me?" Veronica crossed her arms, her gaze fixed on Eileen. Gabriel tensed on. The hotel bed. This wasn't a simple complaint. This was territory being marked, power being asserted. Eileen kept her voice calm. "Julia isn't a guest, she's my daughter, and Mr. Miller already knew I might need to bring her occasionally." Veronica took a step toward her. "Well, when Gabriel gets back, we'll clear this up. Because the way things are going, it seems like you're starting to think you own the place." Julia clutched Marina tighter, her eyes wide. Eileen made a gentle gesture for her daughter to go to the bedroom. The girl obeyed, but Gabriel saw tears starting to form. She went into the baby's room and stood there, hugging one of the stuffed animals, her small body trembling. In the living room, the tension continued. Veronica wasn't yelling, but there was something more dangerous in the controlled way she spoke. Every word was chosen to belittle, to intimidate, to make it clear who she thought was in charge. "You're the help, Eileen. The help. Don't get confused. You take care of the kids because you're paid to, not because you're part of the family. And if you don't agree with the rules, there are plenty of people out there looking for a job." Eileen didn't respond. She just looked away, her hands clasped together. Gabriel felt rage rise like lava. How dare Veronica treat someone who cared for his children with such affection this way? How could she allow herself to speak like that to a woman who had never been anything but respectful? Veronica left soon after, slamming the door. Eileen stood still for a long moment, taking a deep breath. Then she went to the baby's room and found Julia still crying softly. She knelt beside her daughter and hugged her, whispering words of comfort that Gabriel couldn't fully hear, but whose content he could imagine. That night Gabriel didn't sleep. He watched every movement, every interaction, every moment. He saw Veronica sneak out at 11 p.m., leaving the babies completely alone in the apartment. She didn't return until 2 in the morning, smelling of cigarettes and strong perfume. She didn't check on the children, didn't verify anything. She just went straight to the guest room and slept. When Gabriel returned to New York the next day, he was different. Something fundamental had broken. He could no longer look at Veronica without seeing the recorded images, without hearing her words on the phone, without remembering Julia crying in fear. Veronica greeted him with a warm kiss, talking about how difficult it had been, but that she had managed. Gabriel forced a smile, thanked her, and said he needed to take a shower. He locked himself in the bathroom and stood under the water until it ran cold, trying to process everything he had seen, everything he now knew. In the following days, Gabriel watched all the recordings again. He organized the files, separated the most damning moments, and transcribed the phone conversations. Each piece of evidence was like another brick being added to a wall that definitively separated him from any future with Veronica. But there was something else in the recordings that caught his attention. In the moments when Eileen was alone with the children, Gabriel noticed nuances he hadn't seen before. The way she looked at the babies wasn't just professional. There was something deeper there, a connection that went beyond duty. She talked to them as if she knew their temperaments, as if she understood their needs almost intuitively. And there was that one specific episode. One morning while feeding Marina, Eileen whispered something that made Gabriel pause the video and turn the volume all the way up. "Your mommy would want me to take good care of you. And I will, my loves. As long as I'm alive, you'll be protected. I promised her." Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. What promise was that? How did Eileen know the triplets' biological mother? This couldn't be a coincidence. The woman he had hired through a simple referral had some connection to his children's past, and he needed to find out what it was. He confronted Eileen on a quiet afternoon, after Veronica had left and the babies were sleeping. He showed her the recording, the volume low but audible. Eileen turned pale, her hands trembling slightly. "I can explain, Mr. Miller, but you have to understand, I never meant to deceive anyone." Gabriel pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "Then explain it to me, Eileen, because I need to understand what's happening." And so, with a trembling voice and teary eyes, Eileen told a story that Gabriel could never have imagined. She had been friends with Teresa, the triplets' biological mother. They had worked together as housekeepers years ago. Teresa was young, a dreamer, but life had been cruel to her. She got pregnant by a man who disappeared as soon as he heard the news. She found out it was triplets when it was too late for any decision other than to move forward. Teresa had serious health problems, a weak heart, a high-risk pregnancy, complications piling up. Eileen was there through it all, providing support as best she could, holding her friend's hand during panic attacks about the future. Teresa knew she wouldn't survive the birth. The doctors had been clear, the chances were minimal, and she made a decision. She would ask for the babies to be placed for adoption immediately, with a family that could give them everything she never could. But before she passed, Teresa made Eileen promise something. That she would find a way to know who had adopted the children, that she would check if they were okay, that she would intervene if necessary. Eileen promised, holding her friend's cold hands, never imagining that keeping that promise would be so complicated. Teresa passed away shortly after giving birth, just as the doctors had predicted. Eileen was devastated, but didn't forget her promise. She investigated discreetly, found out that triplet babies had been adopted by a businessman on the Upper West Side. She got the referral through an acquaintance who worked in the building. She was hired, and since then, she had been watching, caring for, and protecting her friend's children, as if they were her responsibility too. Gabriel listened in silence, tears streaming down his face without any attempt to control them. Eileen wasn't there by chance. She was there out of love, loyalty, and a promise made to a woman in her final moments. The children he loved had been loved even before he knew they existed. Teresa had ensured they would have someone watching over them, protecting them, even from afar. "And Julia?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse. Eileen smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "Julia knows the story of her Aunt Teresa, as she calls her. She knows these babies are special, and she decided on her own that she would help take care of her little heart siblings." Gabriel was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city below. When he turned around, he had made a decision. "Eileen, I saw everything that happened these past few days. I saw how Veronica treated the children when she thought no one was looking. I saw how she humiliated you in front of Julia, and I also saw how you care for my children as if they were your own. Now I need your help to do the right thing." And so, together, Gabriel and Eileen began to plan what would come next. The truth needed to come out, but in a way that left no room for manipulation or escape. Veronica had built a careful public image, but Gabriel held the proof that would tear it all down, and he knew exactly how to use it. The moment of revelation was coming. Gabriel chose the date carefully. It would be in 3 weeks, enough time to organize everything down to the smallest detail, but not so long that he would lose his nerve, or that Veronica would suspect anything. The event would be presented as a celebration of his 6-month anniversary of fatherhood, an important milestone he wanted to share with his closest friends and family. Veronica loved the idea. She saw it as a perfect opportunity to further strengthen her public image alongside Gabriel and the children. The preparations were meticulous. Gabriel rented an elegant space in Midtown, a venue with modern decor and state-of-the-art technology. He hired a caterer, a decorator, and a photographer. He sent invitations to family, friends, colleagues, some important clients, and several people from Veronica's social circle. The event promised to be memorable, and everyone accepted the invitation with enthusiasm. Veronica threw herself into the planning with renewed energy. She chose her dress weeks in advance, planned every detail of her look, and rehearsed poses for the photos that would surely flood her social media. She saw the event as a kind of coronation, the moment she would be officially established as part of this successful and admired family. Gabriel, meanwhile, was working in parallel on a very different presentation. With the help of a trusted technician, he carefully edited the security camera footage, selecting the most revealing moments. Veronica ignoring the cries, leaving the babies alone, talking on the phone about her calculated plans. He also organized screenshots of conversations, audio clips and documentary evidence that a private investigator had gathered about her history in previous relationships. Eileen knew everything. In the weeks leading up to the event, she and Gabriel developed a relationship of deep trust. It was no longer just an employee caring for a boss's children. She was a partner protecting children they both loved, each in their own way. They talked at length after the babies were asleep, sharing stories about Teresa, about the hopes she had for her children, about how life had conspired to bring them all together. Julia had also been prepared. Gabriel spoke with the little girl one special afternoon, explaining that on the day of the event some important things would be revealed, that it might be scary but that everything would be okay. Julia, with the peculiar maturity of a child who had to grow up fast, understood. She trusted Mr. Gabriel, as she called him. He had been kind to her mother. He had been good to the babies. She knew he would do the right thing. The night of the event arrived with the New York sky painted in shades of orange and purple. Gabriel wore a simple but elegant navy blue suit. He spent a long time in the babies' room before leaving, holding each one, whispering words of love and protection. Luke gripped his finger with a tiny hand. Peter laughed when Gabriel tickled his belly. Marina just looked at him with those huge dark eyes, as if she understood that something important was about to happen. Veronica was stunning. A red dress that accentuated every curve, flawless hair, perfect makeup. She arrived at the venue radiant, greeting everyone with warm hugs, posing for photos, and distributing strategic smiles. Gabriel watched it all with a cold calm that surprised even himself. There was no more nervousness, only certainty. The guests began to arrive. Gabriel's mother, an elegant grey-haired woman who had always supported her son's decision to adopt. A few cousins, college friends, colleagues, important clients, influential people from the business world. And also many from Veronica's social circle, social media influencers, marketing professionals, people accustomed to this type of event. Eileen was there too, but not as an employee. Gabriel had insisted on inviting her as a special guest, reserving a prominent place for her and Julia. Veronica had questioned it, finding it strange, but Gabriel insisted, saying that Eileen was fundamental to the babies' lives and deserved to be recognized. Veronica eventually agreed, albeit with some resistance. Dinner was served, conversations flowed, and ambient music created a pleasant atmosphere. Gabriel circulated among the guests, chatting, thanking them for coming, keeping everything within the expected normality. Veronica was in her element, telling stories about the babies, talking about the challenges and joys of shared parenthood, constructing a perfect narrative of a devoted partner. After dessert, Gabriel went up to the small stage set up at the front of the room. He asked for everyone's attention. The chatter ceased, forks were set down, and all eyes turned to him. Veronica, seated at the main table, smiled proudly, expecting an emotional speech about family, love, and gratitude. Gabriel began exactly that way. He spoke about how fatherhood had transformed his life, about the unconditional love he felt for Luke, Peter, and Marina, about how giving up his old routine had been easy compared to the joy of watching them grow up healthy. People smiled, some were moved. Everything seemed to be following the expected script. But just as many were expecting the final toast, Gabriel changed his tone. I want to take this special moment to share something very important with all of you. In recent months, I've learned that family is built on truth, and truth is what I need to offer you today. He gave a signal. The huge screen behind him lit up. The first image was a beautiful photo of Veronica with the babies, taken weeks earlier. She was smiling radiantly, holding Marina while Luke and Peter were in their bouncers beside her. It looked like the perfect family scene. This photo was posted on social media 3 weeks ago, Gabriel continued, his voice firm. It received thousands of likes, hundreds of comments praising the dedication, the love, the beauty of the family we were building. Veronica was still smiling, but something in her eyes began to shift, a small spark of suspicion. But I've learned that images can lie, that smiles can hide intentions very different from what they appear to be. The screen changed. A video began to play. The date and time were stamped in the corner. Veronica in the apartment's living room, headphones in, scrolling through her phone. In the background, clearly audible, the baby's cries. She didn't move. She just kept scrolling, indifferent. The silence in the room was absolute. All eyes were fixed on the screen. Veronica turned white, her hand gripping her napkin tightly. The video continued, scene after scene. Veronica ignoring the cries, leaving bottles in the cribs without changing diapers, leaving the apartment late at night, leaving the babies completely alone. The camera showed the clock, 11:15 p.m. 4-month-old babies with no adult present. Murmurs began to spread through the room. Shocked faces, expressions of disbelief. Gabriel's mother brought a hand to her mouth. Some guests were already taking out their phones, filming the screen, recording everything, but the worst was yet to come. Gabriel played the audio of the phone conversation. Veronica's voice crystal clear, talking about her plan to make him give up the children, about the marriage followed by a lucrative divorce, about being there only for financial gain. The reaction was immediate. People stood up, some in shock, others in outrage. Veronica tried to stand too, but her legs wouldn't respond. She was paralyzed, her face flushed with redness and shame. But the presentation wasn't over. Gabriel then showed the scene of Eileen's humiliation. Veronica, intimidating, threatening, belittling. And Julia, a 7-year-old child, watching it all in terror, clutching a stuffed animal, trembling with fear. That's when Eileen stood. But Gabriel had planned this moment with her. She walked calmly to the stage, Julia by her side. The girl was carrying a folder of drawings. Gabriel turned to the audience. Eileen is not here just as the person who cares for my children. She is here because she made a promise to the biological mother of Luke, Peter, and Marina. Teresa was her friend, and before she passed away, she asked Eileen to ensure that the babies would be safe, loved, and protected. Eileen kept that promise. She didn't take this job by chance. She came because she had to honor the word she gave to a friend who is no longer with us. Tears were streaming down many faces. The story of Teresa, told briefly but with emotional depth, touched everyone. Eileen's dedication, her silent loyalty, the love with which she cared for the children, even in the face of intimidation. And Julia, Gabriel continued, looking at the girl with affection. This 7-year-old girl has more compassion and empathy than many adults. She saw my children as her heart siblings. She cared for them, protected them, loved them. Julia opened the folder and showed the drawings. They were projected on the screen one by one. Simple but touching drawings. 4 children holding hands, all smiling. A house with hearts in the windows. A colorful, different, but united family. And then the final drawing appeared. A scene that made the entire room gasp. It was an exact reproduction of the moment of humiliation. Veronica standing, her finger pointed. Eileen with her head down, and Julia in the corner, tears drawn on her little face. At the bottom, in neat but childish handwriting, was a phrase the girl had heard Veronica say, "You're the help, don't get confused." The tension in the room was palpable. Veronica finally managed to stand, trying to say something, but no words came out. She looked around and saw only looks of condemnation, disappointment, and disgust. Her followers, who were there as guests, were already posting on social media, exposing what was happening in real time. A woman approached Veronica, someone who had been introduced as a friend. "I thought you were different," she said, her voice cold. "But you're exactly the kind of person we cancel online." And she turned her back. One by one, people began to move away. Some left the room. Others gathered in groups, talking in low but indignant tones. Gabriel's mother went to Eileen and hugged her, whispering her thanks. Some guests approached Julia, praising her courage. Veronica was left alone in the center of the room. Then, without a word, she grabbed her purse and left. The door closed behind her with a definitive sound. No one followed her. No one tried to console her. She had built an image based on lies, and now she was watching it all crumble in real time. Gabriel came down from the stage and went to Eileen and Julia. He hugged them both, and for the first time in weeks he felt the weight being lifted from his shoulders. The truth hurt. The exposure had been brutal, but it was necessary. The babies deserved protection, Eileen deserved recognition, and the lie needed to be unmasked. The guests who remained transformed the event into something different than planned. Deep conversations about responsibility, about appearances versus reality, about what family truly means. Gabriel's mother took symbolic command, proposing a toast not to the event, but to the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard. That night, returning home with Eileen and Julia, the three adults sat in the living room while the babies slept. Gabriel had a proposal. He wanted to formalize co-guardianship of the children with Eileen. He wanted to ensure that she and Julia would have stability, a home, resources. Not as charity, but as recognition that they were an essential part of this family. Eileen cried, not tears of sadness, but of relief. She had kept her promise to Teresa. The babies were safe, protected, loved. And now she was sure they always would be. Julia, already sleepy, whispered something that made Gabriel smile. "Now we're a real family, right?" "Yes, sweetheart," he replied. "Now we're a real family." And for the first time in months, Gabriel slept in peace. The first few days after the event were strange. Gabriel would wake up still expecting to see texts from Veronica, still anticipating her presence in the apartment. But she had completely vanished. Her social media went silent for 48 hours, and when it returned, it was only to post a cold note about needing time for personal reflection. Nothing about Gabriel, nothing about the children, nothing acknowledging what had happened. The strategy was clear: erase, move on, rebuild her image somewhere else. But the internet doesn't forget. Videos from the event leaked, shared by dozens of guests. Within 2 days, the story had gone viral. Gossip sites, news portals, social commentary accounts, everyone was discussing the case. Some defended the public exposure, others questioned Gabriel's methods. But the vast majority turned against Veronica, her calculated coldness, her documented manipulation. Endorsement deals were cancelled. Brands that had her as an ambassador issued statements distancing themselves. The social circle that once celebrated her now shunned her. Veronica tried to reverse the situation, giving an interview about overcoming adversity and learning. But the public didn't buy it. The evidence was too concrete, the images too shocking. In less than a month, she moved out of New York. Some said she went upstate, others that she was abroad. Gabriel didn't care. She was out of their lives. And that was all that mattered. While the outside world buzzed with the controversy, inside the Upper West Side apartment, a quieter, more profound transformation was taking place. Gabriel, Eileen, and Julia now had to figure out how to function as a real family. No longer an emergency or convenience family, but a genuine unit built on conscious choices. The first change was practical. Gabriel insisted that Eileen and Julia move into the apartment. He had more than enough space, and the logistical sense was only part of the reason. The real motivation was the certainty that these children needed these two women as much as they needed him. Eileen hesitated, worried about boundaries and roles, but Gabriel was firm. This wasn't about an employer and an employee. It was about family. Julia got her own room, decorated to her liking. The girl, who had always shared a small room with her mother, was thrilled with her own space. Gabriel and Eileen spent an entire weekend helping her organize it, assembling bookshelves, choosing curtains, and painting one wall the light pink she had picked out. It was a moment of both literal and symbolic construction. But not everything was simple. The babies began to show signs of anxiety. Luke would cry whenever Gabriel was out of his sight for more than a few minutes. Peter had trouble sleeping, waking up several times during the night. Marina would refuse her bottle if it wasn't Eileen offering it. The pediatrician explained that these were manifestations of insecurity, remnants of the period when they were neglected. "Babies feel more than we imagine," he said. "They registered that lack of care." Gabriel blamed himself. How had he been so blind? How had he not noticed sooner? Sessions with a child psychologist helped, but the guilt remained, a constant shadow. Eileen, sensing the weight he carried, sat down with Gabriel one night after the children were asleep. "You didn't fail them, Gabriel. You protected them. The moment you realized, you acted. Many men would have ignored the signs, would have chosen the relationship over the truth. You chose your children. That's not failure, it's love." Eileen's words didn't erase the guilt, but they softened its edges. Gabriel began to understand that perfection wasn't possible, that mistakes would happen, but that intention and corrective action were what truly mattered. Julia also needed support. The scene of the humiliation had left its mark. She had occasional nightmares, waking up scared, calling for her mother. Eileen took her to a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma. The sessions were gentle, involving play and drawing, but they were effective. Slowly, Julia began to process what she had experienced, to understand that it wasn't her fault, that she was safe now. One afternoon, Julia showed Gabriel a drawing she had made in therapy. It was a large tree with deep roots and sprawling branches. On each branch was a face: Gabriel, Eileen, Luke, Peter, Marina, and herself. The psychologist explained that trees were symbols of family in their sessions, and Julia had chosen to put them all together, not as separate branches, but as part of the same trunk. Gabriel framed that drawing and hung it on the living room wall, next to the one of the children holding hands. It was a visual reminder that family didn't have a single shape, that it was built on daily choices of presence and care. The months passed. Luke, Peter, and Marina grew, each developing distinct personalities. Luke was the observer, the one who would quietly study everything around him before reacting. Peter was the active one, always fiddling with something, always curious. Marina was the diplomat, the one who smiled at everyone, who seemed to understand emotions before they were spoken. Julia became an essential part of the routine. She helped feed them, invented games, and sang songs she learned at school. The babies reacted to her in a special way, their faces lighting up when they saw her. The bond between the four of them was genuine, built in small daily moments of interaction and affection. Gabriel and Eileen developed a balanced partnership. There was no longer a hierarchy of boss and employee. They made decisions about the children together, discussed educational approaches, and divided responsibilities naturally. Eileen finally felt seen, valued, part of something bigger, and Gabriel discovered that sharing fatherhood didn't diminish his love for the children, but amplified it. There were inevitably moments of tension. One night, Gabriel and Eileen argued about the best way to handle Peter's growing tantrums. Voices were raised, differing opinions defended with passion. But after the argument, they sat down and talked calmly, found a middle ground, and implemented it together. That's how it worked. Not perfect, but real. Gabriel's family, especially his mother, fully embraced the new arrangement. Mrs. Miller, as Julia called her, visited regularly, bringing homemade cakes, offering help, and forming a special bond with Eileen. The two women, from different generations but with similar values, became genuine friends. One Sunday afternoon, months after the event, Gabriel hosted a barbecue at the apartment. He invited close friends, some colleagues and family. It was a simple gathering without fanfare, with no intention other than to share a pleasant moment. The babies were in their bouncers in the shade. Julia circulated among the adults handing out napkins, and Eileen commanded the kitchen with her characteristic efficiency. One of Gabriel's friends, who had been at the fateful event, struck up a conversation. "How's it going, man? For real?" Gabriel looked around, the babies laughing at the funny faces their uncle was making. Julia running around with a cousin her age, Eileen chatting animatedly with his mother. The house was full of life, of good noise, of genuine presence. "It's real," he replied. "Hard sometimes, always tiring, but real, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." His friend nodded, smiling. "That's what matters, right? The real, not the perfect." That night, after everyone had left and the children were asleep, Gabriel, Eileen, and Julia sat on the balcony. The city glittered below, millions of lights twinkling in the urban expanse. They sat in silence for a while, just enjoying the moment. "You know what Teresa would say if she saw this?" Eileen broke the silence, her voice soft. "She'd say, 'It worked out. that her babies found not just a father but a whole family. Gabriel felt tears well up but didn't try to hold them back. "I wish I could have met her. I wish I could thank her for trusting me." "She trusted you because she saw in you what I saw," Eileen replied. "A heart capable of loving without conditions, and she wasn't wrong." Julia, who had been listening with her characteristic attention, shifted in her chair. "Aunt Teresa is happy up in heaven, right? Watching us take care of her babies." Eileen hugged her daughter. "Absolutely. Sweetheart, absolutely." In the following months, life continued its rhythm. Luke took his first steps, supported by Gabriel's hands. Peter said his first word, which was a jumbled mix of mama and dada that made everyone laugh. Marina developed a habit of hugging Julia whenever she saw her, a gesture of pure affection that could melt any heart. Gabriel legally formalized the co-guardianship with Eileen. It was a bureaucratic process, but a necessary one. Now, officially, the children had two legal guardians. If anything happened to Gabriel, Eileen would have all the rights and resources to continue caring for them. It was a security they both needed. There were professional changes, too. Gabriel reorganized his company, delegated more, and hired a trusted partner. He realized he didn't need to control everything, that he could be a present father and a successful businessman, but he needed to set clear boundaries. Work was important, but family was the priority. Eileen, with Gabriel's encouragement, went back to school. She enrolled in an early childhood education program. She had always dreamed of working formally with children, and now she had the opportunity and support to make it happen. Julia was proud, telling everyone at school that her mom was in college. And so, day by day, this unconventional family solidified. There was no script, no manual, just imperfect people making daily choices of presence, patience, and love. On an ordinary Saturday afternoon, almost a year after the event that had changed everything, Gabriel watched the scene unfolding in the living room. Luke and Peter were playing with building blocks, constructing wobbly towers that collapsed to their delight. Marina was in Eileen's lap, listening to a story her mother was reading aloud. Julia was drawing on the floor, focused on creating another masterpiece for the private art gallery that was the living room wall. There was no dramatic music, no cinematic moment. It was just life happening in its truest form. And Gabriel realized that this was exactly what he had always been searching for. Not the perfect image of a family, not the romanticized version of fatherhood, but the real version, with all the complexities, challenges, and beauty that it entailed. Eileen looked up from the book and met Gabriel's gaze. They smiled, a silent understanding passing between them. They had walked a difficult path, weathered storms, and faced painful truths, but they had come out on the other side, not unscathed, but stronger. Julia finished her drawing and ran to show it to them. It was their house, with everyone inside. 6 figures with drawn-on smiles, vibrant colors filling every space. At the top, written in neat letters, "Our family." Gabriel took the drawing and studied every detail. Then, with Julia by his side, he found the perfect spot on the wall to hang it. It would be another visual record of their journey, another proof that family is built not with perfection, but with conscious choices to stay, to care, to love. That night, after the children were asleep, Gabriel stayed for a while in the Triplets' room just watching. Luke breathed peacefully. Peter had a little smile on his face, even in his sleep, and Marina held her teddy bear tightly. They were safe, loved, protected. Teresa's promise had been fulfilled. The family he had dreamed of had become real, in a way he could never have planned, but that was perfect in its imperfection. Gabriel whispered into the darkness of the room, words he knew the children wouldn't consciously hear, but that perhaps their hearts would feel. "I promise I'll be here. Always. Not perfectly, but genuinely. You will never be alone. Never." And he left the room with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally found his place in the world, not as the successful businessman, not as the exemplary son, not as the idealized image of a father, but simply as Gabriel, an imperfect man who loved 4 children with everything he had, supported by an extraordinary woman who had honored an impossible promise, and surrounded by a new definition of family that defied conventions but worked perfectly for them. Life would continue to bring challenges. There would be sleepless nights, financial worries, difficult decisions about education and the future, but they would face them together, this family built on conscious choices, genuine loyalty, and a love that transcended DNA and social conventions. And in the end, that was exactly how it was supposed to be. Family was never about perfection. It was about presence, not about empty promises, but about the daily choice to remain, not about appearances, but about truth. And in that Upper West Side apartment, in a vast and impersonal city, 6 people had found each other and built something that no lie could ever destroy. The journey was far from over, but they were ready for every next chapter together. Fall arrived in New York with its crisp mornings and sunny afternoons. The triplets would be turning 1 in a few weeks, and Gabriel could hardly believe how quickly the time had passed. Luke was already walking steadily, exploring every corner of the apartment with insatiable curiosity. Peter had developed a fascination with music, drumming on any surface he could find. Marina was speaking single words, calling each person in the house by nicknames only she fully understood. It was a Thursday morning when the pediatrician called with an unusual request. He needed to speak with Gabriel and Eileen in person about something related to Marina's routine checkup. Nothing urgent, he assured them, but important. Gabriel felt his stomach clench. Eileen, who was beside him when he hung up, immediately noticed the tension in his face. "What is it?" Gabriel explained briefly. They scheduled the appointment for the next day and spent the next 24 hours in a state of contained anxiety, trying not to show their concern in front of the children, but exchanging looks heavy with worry. At the office, Dr. Harris greeted them with his usual calm demeanor. He asked them to sit and opened Marina's file on his desk. "The blood work showed something we need to monitor closely. Marina has a congenital heart condition, likely inherited from her biological mother. It's not severe at the moment, but it will require constant monitoring and possibly surgery in the future." Gabriel felt the world spin. Eileen turned pale, her hands gripping her purse tightly. The doctor continued to explain the condition, the necessary care, the restrictions on physical activity, the warning signs. But Gabriel was barely listening. All he could think about was Marina, his small smiling daughter, facing something she wasn't even old enough to understand. Eileen was the one who asked the practical questions. What tests would be needed? How often? Were there treatments? What was the long-term prognosis? The doctor answered everything patiently, explaining that the condition was treatable, that many children led completely normal lives with proper care, that medicine had advanced enormously in this area. When they left the office, neither of them spoke on the way to the car. Only when they were inside, doors closed, did Eileen begin to cry. It wasn't a dramatic cry, but silent tears that streamed down her face endlessly. Gabriel found himself doing something he hadn't planned. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it firmly. "We'll take care of her, together. She's going to be okay." Eileen nodded, trying to control her breathing. It's just that when Teresa passed, it was for this exact reason. Her heart couldn't take it. And now, knowing that Marina has the same condition, that she might have inherited this. I can only think that Teresa knew. She knew this could happen, and she still asked me to look after them, as if she knew they would need someone who understood. Gabriel hadn't thought of it from that angle. Teresa knew about her own heart condition, knew she could have passed it on to her children, and yet, or perhaps because of it, she had made Eileen promise to care for them. It was another layer of responsibility, but also of purpose. In the following days, they completely reorganized their routine. Appointments with a pediatric cardiologist were scheduled. More detailed tests were booked. Gabriel researched the condition obsessively, read medical articles, and joined online groups for parents of children with heart conditions. Eileen spoke at length with the cardiologist, taking notes on every detail, every instruction, every warning sign. Julia noticed that something was different. One afternoon after school, she struck up a conversation with her mother while helping to fold clean laundry. "Is Marina sick?" Eileen stopped what she was doing. She sat on the floor next to her daughter and explained, in simple but honest words, about Marina's condition, that her little heart needed special care, that she would be okay, but that everyone would need to help. Julia was thoughtful for a long moment. Then she asked, something that took Eileen by surprise, "Is that why Aunt Teresa went to heaven? Was her heart special too?" Eileen felt the tears return. "Yes, sweetheart, that's why." "Then Marina is even more like Aunt Teresa, and I'm going to take care of her, just like we promised." The determination in the 8-year-old's voice was astounding. Gabriel, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, had to step away for a moment to keep from crying in front of them. Julia's maturity, the way that child understood responsibility and love, touched him deeply. It was Eileen who suggested, a few days later, that they visit Teresa's grave. Gabriel had thought about it before, but had never found the right time. Now it seemed essential. They needed this meeting, this connection with the woman who had started it all. The following Saturday, they left Luke and Peter with Gabriel's mother, and the 4 of them went to the cemetery. Marina slept in her stroller, oblivious to the meaning of the outing. Julia walked beside Eileen, serious and pensive. Gabriel carried white flowers that Eileen had chosen carefully. The grave was simple but well tended. Eileen visited regularly, Gabriel discovered. She knelt before. The headstone cleared away the old flowers and placed the new ones. Julia approached and touched the stone gently. "Hi, Aunt Teresa. I brought the babies for you to meet. For you to see how big they are. Marina's heart is like yours, but we're going to take really good care of her, I promise." Gabriel had to turn his face away, hot tears streaming down uncontrollably. Julia's innocence and sincerity, speaking to someone she had never met but loved by connection, was too much to bear. Eileen spoke too, her voice choked with emotion. "We kept the promise, T. The babies found a wonderful father. They have a family that loves them, and Marina will have all the care you would have wanted for her. You can rest easy." Then it was Gabriel's turn. He approached, kneeling beside Eileen. "I've never done this before, never spoken to someone who's passed, but I need to thank you, Teresa. Thank you for giving life to 3 incredible children. Thank you for trusting them to be adopted. And thank you for having a friend like Eileen, who honored her word in a way I can't even express. Your children are my entire life, and I will protect them until my last breath." They stayed there for almost an hour. Eileen told stories about Teresa, about their friendship, about the dreams she had for her children. Julia placed a drawing she had made, protected in a plastic sleeve, against the headstone. It was Teresa in heaven, looking down at 4 children playing happily. When they finally left the cemetery, something had changed. It wasn't visible, it wasn't quantifiable, but it was real. They had closed a circle, they had honored Teresa in a tangible way, and they had reaffirmed, in her presence, their commitment to those children. In the car on the way home, Marina woke up and started making happy little noises. Gabriel looked in the rearview mirror and saw her smiling, her little eyes shining. She was happy, healthy in that moment, alive. And that was all that mattered. That night, after all the children were asleep, Gabriel and Eileen met in the kitchen. He was making tea. She was packing lunchboxes for the next day. They worked in a comfortable silence, the domestic routine creating an intimacy that neither of them had realized was growing. Gabriel broke the silence first. "I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks about everything that's happened, about how we got here, and I realized something." Eileen stopped what she was doing, looking at him attentively. "I realized I can't imagine this family without you and Julia anymore. Not as an employee, not as help, but as an essential part of it all. You two are just as important as I am in these children's lives, maybe even more so." Eileen felt her heart race. Gabriel, he interrupted gently. "Just Gabriel. No Mr. Miller. No formality. We're partners in this. We're family." Eileen nodded, unable to speak. Gabriel continued, the words coming out with a vulnerability he rarely showed. "You saved me, Eileen. You saved my children. You showed me what true loyalty, what unconditional love means. And every day I learn something new from you. About patience, about quiet strength, about doing the right thing even when it's hard." He paused, taking a deep breath. I don't know what all of this means yet. I don't know what shape our family will take from here on out. But I know I want you here, not out of obligation, not for convenience, but because I can't imagine doing this without you anymore." Eileen felt the tears return, but this time they were different. They weren't from sadness or worry, but from something more complex: relief, gratitude, and perhaps the beginning of something she didn't dare to name. "I can't either," she whispered. "Imagine being anywhere else, caring for other children. These babies are mine too. In my heart, they always have been. Since Teresa asked me, since I promised. And you," she hesitated, searching for the right words, "you showed me that good men exist, that fatherhood can be beautiful, dedicated, real." They stood there looking at each other across the kitchen, lit only by the stove light. There was no kiss, no dramatic declaration, but there was a recognition that something was growing between them, slowly, naturally, built on months of partnership, respect, and mutual care for the children they loved. Gabriel took a step toward her. "Can I hug you?" Eileen nodded. The hug was long, tight, full of unspoken meanings. It was comfort. It was gratitude. It was connection. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something more. When they separated, both had teary eyes. Gabriel gently touched Eileen's face. "It doesn't have to be now, it doesn't have to be fast, but I want you to know that you're important, not just as a mother to the children, but as a person, as a woman, as Eileen." She smiled, the kind of small but genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "I know, and you're important too, more than I was ready to admit." In the following days, the dynamic shifted subtly, not in an obvious way, but in small gestures. Gabriel would hold Eileen's hand when they discussed decisions about the children. Eileen would rest her head on his shoulder when they watched the babies play. There were casual touches, glances that lasted a second longer, smiles that carried extra meaning. Julia noticed. One night before bed, she commented casually to her mother, "I think Gabriel likes you, Mom. Like the way a man likes a woman." Eileen nearly choked. "What makes you think that?" Julia shrugged, with the wisdom of a child who observes more than she speaks. "He looks at you the same way Melissa's dad looks at her mom, and you get different when he's around. You're happier." Eileen didn't know what to say. Was it that obvious? "And it's okay," Julia continued. "If you like him. He's nice. And we're already kind of a family anyway, right? This would just make it more official." The simplicity with which her daughter saw the situation made Eileen laugh. "If only it were that simple, sweetheart." "But it is," the girl insisted. "You take care of the kids together. You live together. You decide things together. The only thing left is dating, right?" And she fell asleep, leaving her mother awake with thoughts she couldn't organize. Gabriel was having his own reflections. One night he talked to his mother about the situation. Mrs. Miller listened attentively, then smiled the way mothers do when they already knew something before their child admits it. "Gabriel, my son, family has never been about following rules. It's about finding people who make your life make sense. Does Eileen make your life make sense?" Gabriel thought honestly. "Yes, she does." "Then don't complicate what can be simple. Life is hard enough without us creating obstacles where there are none. But what if it doesn't work out? What if I ruin everything we've built? And what if it does work out? What if it's exactly what all of you need?" The first appointment with the pediatric cardiologist was a milestone. Dr. Fernando was an experienced and empathetic man in his 50s. He examined Marina carefully, asked detailed questions about her routine, and explained every aspect of her condition with clarity. Gabriel and Eileen were both present, asking questions, taking notes. The doctor noticed the dynamic between them and, at the end of the appointment, commented on something that resonated. "You two make quite a team. Marina is very lucky to have two such dedicated and present parents." Neither of them corrected him. The word parents in the plural, including Eileen in that category, sounded strangely right. Because that's what she was. Not biologically, not legally beyond the shared guardianship yet, but emotionally, practically. She was as much a mother to those children as Gabriel was a father. Marina's surgery would be necessary, but not immediately. She would need to be at least 2 years old, grow a little more, get stronger before the procedure. It was an agonizing wait, but also a time to prepare themselves emotionally and practically. Gabriel began researching the best surgeons, the most equipped hospitals, the most advanced treatments. Eileen organized a rigorous medical tracking system with medication charts, a symptom diary, and activity monitoring. Together, they created a safety net around Marina that would ensure nothing went unnoticed. On a Sunday afternoon, a few weeks after learning about Marina's condition, the whole family was gathered at the apartment. Mrs. Miller had come for lunch, and some of Gabriel's cousins were visiting. The house was full, noisy, alive. Marina was in Eileen's lap. Luke was playing with blocks on the rug, and Peter was trying to climb the sofa under Julia's watchful eye. Gabriel observed it all in the way he had developed over the past few months, a gaze that absorbed every detail, every moment, storing memories like treasures. Mrs. Miller approached him, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "You've built something beautiful, Gabriel. Your grandmother would be proud." Gabriel looked at his mother, confused. "Why grandma?" "Because she always said that you choose your real family, that blood connects, but choice transforms. And you chose every person here, the babies, Eileen, Julia. You chose to love, chose to stay, chose to build. That's more powerful than any blood tie." Later, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Gabriel found Eileen on the balcony. She was looking out at the city, her arms crossed against the night chill. He came and stood beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "About how strange life is, how everything connects in ways we could never plan. If Teresa hadn't made me promise, if you hadn't adopted her babies specifically, if that referral hadn't come to me. So many ifs, and they all led here." Gabriel was silent for a moment. Then he said something he had been thinking for weeks. "I don't think it was a coincidence. I think Teresa knew. Somehow she knew you would find your way to her children, and I think she also knew you would find more than that. You'd find a family of your own, too." Eileen turned to face him, her eyes shining in the dim light of the balcony. "Do you really believe that?" "I do, because I can't believe this is all just luck. It's fate, providence, whatever you want to call it. But it's bigger than us." Eileen took a step toward him. Gabriel did the same, and there, under the stars hidden by New York's light pollution, on an apartment balcony on the Upper West Side, two adults who had met under the most unlikely circumstances kissed for the first time. It wasn't a passionate or dramatic kiss. It was soft, tentative, full of promise. It was the kiss of two people who already knew each other deeply before allowing themselves this kind of closeness. It was the kiss of partners becoming something more. When they separated, Eileen was smiling. So was Gabriel. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. They just stood there together, looking out at the city that sheltered them, at the life they had built, at the future that was beginning to take shape in colors neither of them had dared to imagine before. Inside the apartment, 4 children slept peacefully. 4 children who would never fully know all the winding paths that led to the family they had, but who would grow up knowing they were deeply loved, unconditionally protected, and part of something that transcended conventions and expectations. And that imperfect family, built on promises, loyalty, and courageous choices, would continue to grow day by day, challenge by challenge, love by love. Because in the end, family was never about perfection. It was always about presence, choice, and the courage to love even when the path isn't clear. And they had all of that in abundance.